Okay, well, welcome, and welcome to anyone viewing this video after we've had it recorded. Thanks for joining us. We are 3 members of Business for Good San Diego. I am Sarah Boschman, and I write the monthly articles for Business for Good San Diego. If you go on our website, it's the ones that are in our updates, and they're updated monthly or bi-monthly. And what we are doing today is we're having a discussion centered on Black history, but also with a focus more on allyship and how we can really help move the needle in different ways in America, and really talking about what does it mean to be an ally? How does that look? And the fact that Black history should really mean something to everyone in America, and diving deeper into that. So I have with me Jason Roberts. He is the co-founder and CEO of Frontline Careers. And he is also a Business for Good board member, a new one this year, along with myself. I am also a new Business for Good board member, so yay. Yay for our new board members. And we have Diolinda Monteiro, who is a former Business for Good board member, and she is the founder and owner of Fifth Dot Studio. So I will just go ahead and, I should say for those of you watching who are not familiar with Business for Good and who we are and what we do, Business for Good is a 501c3 nonprofit. And we were founded really to be a different kind of business owners group where our values drive our impact. So what does that mean? Is that our mission is to unite local San Diego business owners to drive local policy that improves San Diego for all. So we have, we were formed to, as a way of aligning so many local business owners with our values of how our communities should be shaped and the best outcomes for everyone here in San Diego. We're not just following the monolithic voice of big business in our region, but local business ownership comprises a majority of business in San Diego and across the nation. So what we do at Business for Good is we focus on shaping policy, local policy in San Diego County in the 4 areas that we believe are most crucial to improving the health, well-being, and livelihood of our communities. So those 4 action areas are immigration, business resources, environmental health, and housing and homelessness. So if anyone watching is interested, we encourage you to please dive in, get in touch with us. Our membership has availability not for just business owners, but also for individuals and nonprofit and government agencies. So you can visit us at businessforgoodsd.com, and we'd love to have you. So without further ado, Jason, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself if you want to talk a little bit about what Frontline Careers does and who you serve, and kind of your goal for the conversation today.
Absolutely. So yeah, Jason Roberts, thanks for that great intro, Sarah. Been with BFG now going on 2 years, and great organization when you have people like Sarah, Diolinda, and many others who, like you said, Sarah, who are purpose-driven and, are also, for-profit, but are for good. And the 2 are not mutually exclusive, which is why I love being part of this community. But at Frontline Careers, what we do, we are a purpose-driven company, but at our core, we are a workplace assessment company. We focus on frontline work culture. And what I mean by that is we want to find out which companies actually do value and invest in their frontline workers. Those that do, we recognize them as what we call being frontline friendly. And those that aren't quite there, we help them figure out the things that they need to do to improve their workplace so that they can get there. And what this does, it makes it easier for frontline job seekers, frontline employees to find out which companies do I want to work for. So it's a win-win situation at the end of the day. We founded this company. The idea came about from seeing injustices, I guess, if you want to say that, in the workplace, or opportunities to improve it for all, because we believe that businesses can win when their employees win too. So that's who we are, Frontline Careers. Check us out at frontlinecareers.com. But, second to that, we love being a part of BFG, and I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you so much, Jason. And Diolinda, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself and Fifth Dot?
Sure. So I'm Diolinda Monteiro, owner of Fifth Dot Studio. I am a graphics designer, and pretty much I got into BFG. It was during the pandemic. I remember that. I don't remember exactly how many years ago it was, but I remember hearing about this organization at a business event that I went to at the Jacob Center, and a couple of the people were speaking there. It was Lindsay was one of the speakers, and Sam Mazzio was also speaking, and they were talking about, they were different on different days and talking about this organization called Business for Good. They were mentioning it during their talk. And I thought, man, this organization sounds so cool. And I really want to check it out because I don't know, it just sounded so interesting and purpose driven, and it's great. And so I went to one of the mixers, and then I was like, wow, I know that person. I know that person. So these were all business owners that I already knew in my community and that I already admired and, respected, and they were just inspirational. And so it was like I found my people. It was great. And so joined, and I am the head of the comms team and was a board member. And thank you both for being on the board now, because I know that it's a lot of work, but it's good work.
It's good work.
So
Good work.
yeah. And just a little bit about this conversation. So last year, when the comms team was talking about what to do for Black History Month, we decided to interview our Black business owners. And Sarah, you came up with a great set of interview questions, and that I thought you wrote a great article. And we talked about Black businesses that we knew, and we're promoting Black businesses. And then this year came along, and we were all kind of scratching our heads going, well, we don't want to do the same thing as last year. So Jason, I really want to thank you, because when Sarah reached out to you to just basically be honest and say, we don't want to do this wrong, you came up with this idea to have this conversation, and I was super excited. And I'm going to admit to be nervous. I'm nervous about this conversation, but I'm super excited about this conversation.
No need, dear.
I know it's a safe space.
We're gonna have a good time. We're gonna have a good time.
I know, but still, I don't want to mess it up.
Impossible if you're doing it.
Oh,
Impossible.
thank you. All right, take it away, Sarah.
Well, thank you both for this. And yes, it's a really cool opportunity. Yeah, we there's been enough, I think, as Diolinda put it, right, decision making by non-Black people about Black people and what we think.
That's why I appreciate you a lot for reaching out. Like, hey, maybe let's see what a Black person has to say about this. Let's get some other input. So I really do appreciate that and applaud you for doing so, Sarah.
Oh goodness. Well, no, we're so glad that you were ready and willing to jump in and talk with us about it. Because it's true. This is, Diolinda, I think it's interesting that you're saying, that you're nervous to talk about it, because it is a subject that I think a lot of people are just, really nervous about having. It's a discussion that all Americans, I think, are, it's clearly controversial, when really, in many ways shouldn't be. We should be able to talk about these things, but it's, with all the culture wars and political divides and such, I think, there's a little bit of fear, around these discussions. And so, yeah, I'd really like to thank Jason too. It's great to just, Jason's goal of this conversation was really like, let's talk about Black history and its meaning, and Black History Month and commemorating it, but then let's also have a really real conversation about, what Black history means to everyone and what allyship looks like, and the ways in which it can be valuable and meaningful, to help elevate Black voices, and especially local Black businesses, what we can do, how the role of allyship plays in that. So without further ado, I will go ahead. We all kind of put our heads together and came up with some questions that we thought we were kind of the top tier for discussing today. So I'll just go ahead and alternate. We've got about six things on the docket today. So I will just go ahead and start with you, Jason. Our first question is Black History and Black History Month should mean something to everyone, like we're talking about. And what significance does it hold for you? And how do you think it should be celebrated?
Well, obviously being a Black man, it holds, some significance for me in that regard. But, if we take a step back, when you reached out, one of the things that I've come not to like about this month, right? And bear with me, everybody, is the over commercialization of it. You know, it's become so commercialized where we forget what Black History Month is supposed to even be about. I'm just waiting for us to have, Black History Month cereals, you name it, some toys, and we're not celebrating it in the way that I think that, and others think that it should be, right? And for me, so a couple of things that kind of that came to mind, when you reached out is, if we're going to celebrate Black history, let's start with understanding and learning the history, right? First and foremost. So, I think if you ask a lot of folks, they'll say, when you think about Black History Month, what figures or what, people or things come to mind. Obviously, people will say Martin Luther King, right? But our history is so much more, so much more in depth and vast than that. People may have heard about Brown versus Board of Education. Okay, if you guys are familiar with that, but have you heard about Sweat versus Painter? Right. So where I went to undergraduate school, University of Texas at Austin, Hookham, Sweat wanted to attend the law school there, but was denied admission based on his race. That was in the 40s, 1940, 46, something like that. That case, ultimately, the Supreme Court ruled University of Texas could not deny him based on the separate but equal doctrine. That is actually paved the way for Brown versus Board of Education, which led to desegregation and so much more. Civil Rights Act, many years down the road, you have the Voting Rights Act, all those different things. A lot of that's going to start back in the 1940s, and some of that, a lot of people have never heard of Heman Sweat. So understanding the history and really diving into it, not just the big figures that we know, or the March on Washington, Bloody Sunday, the things that we've heard about, but even deeper than that, really understanding the contributions of my people and the contributions of folks like Heman Sweat to just the greater good of this society. Those actions ultimately paved the way, further down the road, Civil Rights Movement, Civil Rights Act, which benefited not just Black folk, it can benefit a lot of people. There are a lot of folks today that enjoy the EEOC and the services it provides. That came out of Civil Rights Act. So our history is American history. And what has kind of troubled me and others sometimes is the commercialization of it, right? Everybody wants to make sure they get out a Black History Month post, right? We want to be seen as being appreciative and things like that, but really, where's the appetite to really learn and to understand and really have these candid conversations? So that's why when you reached out, it's like, let's peel this a little bit deeper. Let's have a conversation about Black history. Let's talk about some of this history, some things that people have never heard before, more than likely. So that's what it means to me. And then on a personal level, Sarah and Diolinda, I think about, my ancestry. Right? I think about even though my dad and several of his 10 siblings, there's a lot of them, have since passed away. I think about the legacy that they left behind for us and the things that they had to struggle with. And so many of them were first in different aspects of their lives. So I think about that history on a more personal level. And I look back on it with pride. I wear this skin with immense pride. And I want that for my children too. So I want them to understand their history, their legacy, from what their grandparents did and their greats did. And these are stories that are, obviously aren't the ones that are highly publicized, but also want them to understand that they come from from great roots and things that they should be extremely prideful of. So that's to me what this month is about. But it's also not just this month, and that's what gets me sometimes too. Is it's a lot more than just one day, 1 month. We have made contributions outside of this month for, hundreds of years, and we'll continue to do that going forward. It's about celebrating our differences. It's about celebrating our different communities. That's what I see in Black History Month. And sometimes what I see is getting lost in the commercialization of it. So I'm looking forward to having this kind of rich conversation today about the month, but more importantly, what it should stand for and what we still need to be discussing.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jason. Diolinda, same question for you. And this was an interesting, I loved how Jason, suggested this conversation of having, a non-Black ally have this discussion because, of getting everybody's viewpoint on this is important. As you just said, Jason, it's about differences and community celebrating differences throughout. And so Diolinda, same question, Black History and Black History Month should mean something to all of us. And what significance does it hold for you and your thoughts on how it should be celebrated?
Thank you. So, Jason, you said something that I heard last year from another Black business owner, Katrina Frisco, that Black history is American history.
Yes.
And when I was reading your article and the responses, and I read that from her, it struck a chord. And Jason, I think you nailed it with the commercialization, and that's it's you see MLK Day sales, and it's true, like we're waiting for the Black History Month sale. So it's, for me, it's a time of reflection and thinking about how far we've come as a nation, but also how far we have yet to go, and that systemic racism is still very much alive in this country, and that we have a lot more work to do. And I didn't know about Sweat versus Painter. I wrote that down, and I'm going to read more about it because for me, it's a constant education. I have a lot of more work to do. It's not enough to say, well, I'm not that guy over there. I'm not that person. That's right. Okay. That's great. But so I take time to pause and reflect on, like I said, how far we've come as a nation, but how far we have yet to go. And this month, and I hate to just say this month, but this is where I'm at in my journey. Yep. I have purchased the book Me and White Supremacy by Layla Satt. And so I'm going to be reading and reflecting on that book.
Deep. Love it.
Awesome. Thank you, Diolinda. Okay, so we're going to move Diolinda. Well, you can kick off. You'll be back to back for this one. So our next question, and segueing, really, that's a great segue into that, is Me and White Supremacy, and really reflecting on the work that, we as allies, as white allies, really need to do to educate ourselves. And, it really is a never ending, as it should be, you have to continually learn to grow. And I think that, a huge part of, as you're saying, Diolinda, is of allyship is constantly learning, constantly educating ourselves, constantly reflecting, carving out space to reflect on what we've learned and our all, unconscious biases and everything that goes into, the whole systemic structure of racism in this country and our role in it. And so this question is a great jumping off point from that, where we talk about allyship, it's now become a buzzword. We hear it all the time. But what is allyship as a non-Black ally? What does allyship look like to you? How do you think an ally should think, act, and importantly, react, right? We have a lot of that. And why is it important for allies to be anti-racist rather than just not racist? Kind of what is the difference there in some of your reading or work or understanding of the subject?
So first of all, I don't call myself an ally. I think that would be like calling myself enlightened. This is a long journey for me, and I can say that I'm better than I used to be, but going back to, for me, as an adult, my aha moment was it was long after Barack Obama was first elected, and it was at some point I remember looking back to when he was running for the presidency, and I know you all have heard it, you both have heard it because I remember it distinctly. You hear someone get on to an interview and they would start out and they would say, well, I'm not a racist, but, and then they would say something really racist, right? And
Yeah.
you know, what's going to happen to this country if a Black man becomes president? What? And it blew my mind, and I remember laughing back then. And I'm embarrassed to say that I was laughing because I shouldn't have been laughing.
Right.
I remember thinking, where are these people from? What the heck rock did you crawl out from under? And then, you know, fast forward to when Trump was elected, and then I was like, whoa, what is actually happening here?
Yeah.
And it was like the Band-Aid was, for me personally. Now this is me as a white person who lived my life largely oblivious. It was like the Band-Aid was ripped off, you know, when I'm sure a lot of people would look at me and go, really? Now you're starting to think about it? But that was, just being honest, that was it for me. That was the time that I really had to stop and start thinking and doing more reading Ibram Kendi's work, reading Robin DiAngelo's work, and starting to really start self-reflecting. And so, and as far as being an ally, all I can say is that it's critical for me when I'm entering discussions and reading to acknowledge that my experience is not universal. And so that's coming back to your comment about being anti-racist. That is, it's doing more. It's self-reflecting and understanding that my experience is not universal. And when I hear conversations or watch the news and I see things that happen that I acknowledge as being, you know, horrific, to put myself in those shoes, and to listen and not speak so much and not laugh.
Excellent, Diolinda. Thank you for your honesty and your candor.
Yeah. That's what I'm talking about right there, Diolinda. You know, let's have some real conversations. Let's be vulnerable a little bit, you know. It's not easy to, you know, say, hey, I did this and I'm not proud of that moment, you know. This is how I felt. This is how I feel today. That's how we break down barriers. That's how we increase the level of understanding when we're able to be vulnerable like that. And so I don't want to just glance over that. I appreciate you being very candid and vulnerable in that moment, Diolinda, sharing that. And what I heard, you know, from you, which when I think about allyship, is number one, it's, you know, keeping it real, it's understanding your privilege. You know, it's understanding, like you said, you try to put yourself in the shoes of others because you recognize that your shoes are different and many times in a beneficial way as it relates to this society. Okay. So it starts with kind of recognizing that privilege. And there's so many folks who don't do that, who want to pretend that there is no privilege when you are Caucasian or you're a white, let's say white male, whatever it is, that you have a privilege just by being that, right? And I think step number one is recognizing that privilege And because when you really step into that and you recognize that privilege, then it opens your eyes to see, well, why is this that way? Or you start to see some of these injustices and you start to speak up as an ally, right? Now you can understand why someone is asking for help or aid. And as an ally, you're going to come and help. You're going to respond to that and render that aid, right? So to me, that's what an ally is, right? Of the Black community is when you see that this community is in need, right? You recognize the privileges you may have and you go and you help, right? At a very, very basic level, that's what it is to be an ally. And we'll talk later about what that means for Black businesses and the likes. But at a very, very basic level, you understand the privilege that you have, right? And you're going to use that to go and help, okay? That's Jason's definition, okay? For the record. Now, but now you ask about being anti-racist, okay? So, and how that's not different from being racist, okay? So when we think, racist behavior, we think about some of the stuff we've seen on TV and some of just outlandish things that are said, even sometimes at the highest levels of government that are said about people who are other, right? And so we think about these racist, bigoted, phrases and, things like that, tropes and things like that. But when we say, anti-racist, what we're talking about is you are actively seeking to undo the inequities that exist, right? So it's almost like taking allyship to another level. And I'm gonna give you guys some examples, right? So if you are sitting and if you're listening to this interview, okay, and you work in corporate America, all right, and right, that let's say, and we see this a lot, especially in frontlines, that your frontline workforce is disproportionately Black. But as you start to go up levels in the organization, you don't find any Black folk, right? Something ain't right, okay? And so being anti-racist is asking that question in your workplace. What's going on here? This seems to be systemic, right? How can we not have a leadership that's reflective of the rest of our organization, right? That's what it means to be anti-racist. Or when we see an interview that's happening, hey, why don't we have any people of color who are also interviewing for this role, especially given that we don't have any, let's say, general managers who are Black across the country, right? I won't sit here and take that we can't find qualified candidates. So anti-racist is you are systematically working to break down the inequities, the injustices that you see. You're actively doing it, right? Even at the risk of blowback to yourself. Okay. So that's what I mean by being an ally of the Black community, being anti-racist in that regard, is you see it, right? You're going to speak out against it, whether it's some of the silliness we're seeing now about we're not going to offer AP classes or AP courses on African American studies. We're not going to have that in our state. There's no need for diversity, equity, and inclusion. You're going to say, hold on, no, that's not true. And here's why we need that. Because when unfortunately it's going to be discounted many times when I'm the voice who's saying why these things are needed. And so in some ways, your voice carries extra weight when you're the one saying, no, this is why we need to have AP courses and AP credits on African American studies, right? This is why we need DEI and why it's been beneficial in my business and why I'm never going back to where it was before. We systematically tore down some of those barriers of the systemic racism that we were talking about earlier. And this is how it's benefited our organization as a whole, right? Sharing those stories is what leads to others doing it within their organizations, within their circles, within their conversations, right? And in essence, breeds more anti-racism, which is what this country needs. And kind of going back to the history of and why it's so important, I said, to learn our history. which is American history. Thanks for pointing out, Diolinda, that you've heard that now a couple of times. The reason why that's so important, because if we don't, this is a cliche in a way, but if we don't understand that history, then in many ways we're doomed to repeat it. Okay, you think about after the Civil Rights Act, why there was a need for the Voting Rights Act, right? Because people were still trying to find ways to prevent Black folk from voting, right? Guess what? We still see it today. Okay, it's just gotten a little bit more sophisticated. Actually, I wouldn't even say that, because some people are just really out there and just really bold in terms of what they're trying to do. But if we don't understand that history and the struggle that was involved to eradicate it many years ago, we're just going to be doomed to kind of go in the opposite direction. And I see some of that even today. And that's why it's like, hey, let's quit the commercialization of Black History Month. Let's get real and discuss what's happening and how that impacts the Black community. And as an ally, as an anti-racist, how you can help, right? And what you should be doing to help in this fight, right? So again, Dylan, I appreciate you being honest and hearing you saying, like, I'm seeking to listen, I'm seeking to understand. Man, that is step number one. And look, you and I just got to get together for coffee one day. I was going to sit down and just chat,
I would love
about
that.
some stuff you're reading. And I hope people who are listening can kind of follow your suits, kind of your lead. Seek to understand, seek to learn, right? And then just listen. I think it goes a really, really long way to being an effective ally of this community. And again, taking a step further, being an anti-racist and really pushing the envelope in ways that we should in this country.
Jason, that was fantastic insight. Thank you so much for going into detail on all of that. And I know that it's super helpful for me to hear, your thoughts on that, about, as you're saying, that's the first step. Just seek to understand the privilege, learn and listen. It's almost as basic as something like stop, drop, and roll, right? We're all told that when we were kids, like with the fire, if you're on fire, all those times that everyone just, spontaneously combusts or whatever. But it's kind of that same, it's so basic, it's so fundamental, but so many of, non-Black allies, especially white, or not even allies, as you said, Diolinda, but those just seeking to learn more, don't do that. Don't take those basic steps. It's almost like, in many ways, they feel compelled to just launch into action. And, we want to help or whatever, or it becomes centered, around them. And it's like, that's the crucial step that's missing, is what I'm hearing you say, is really just take the time to acknowledge the privilege and then learn and seek to understand a little bit more about it and just listen.
Yeah.
And really that's a task that anybody can do. As you said, this isn't something that is so insurmountable or, is impossible for anyone. Those are pretty basic things that all of us have the capacity to do, is, take the time to listen and learn, really with open minds and open hearts too. Not going into it defensive. And, I think that that's kind of something that starts all of that centering themselves, right? Rather, it's that defensiveness. I don't know if you're kind of seeing it the same way, Jason, or.
Yeah, well, it's kind of where we started, right? And again, I'm applauding Diolinda on being just straight up honest. Sometimes it's an uncomfortable conversation, right? It's just not something that's just comes easy where we're going to talk about race, right? So it's stepping into that discomfort, though, is how we grow, right? And when we step into those conversations, seeking to, as the saying goes, seeking to understand versus being understood, right? Then I think we can all, wind up in a better place. But it starts there, seeking not to be heard, all right, but to listen and understand. And I think that is a key trait of someone who wishes to be an ally of this community. someone who wishes to be, anti-racist and break down systemic racism as it exists throughout this country in many different forms, in many different environments, from corporate America to frontline America, to organizations, to good old boy clubs that still exist and still thriving. It starts there.
Excellent. Well, Jason, I think I'm just going to segue into, because you've mentioned this, a couple times about the uncomfortable conversation and just having the uncomfortable conversation and being vulnerable. And so that question that I'd really like to move into is really addressing that. What is the hardest part for you personally about discussing issues around race in America?
The hardest part for me sometimes is for people to really understand what it feels like. Again, it is an immense honor and privilege to wear this beautiful melanin skin, but it comes with challenges, right? To really understand that. I remember having a conversation once with a coworker. This was years ago. We were just having this, I worked with him. He ran shared services for the company, and we just built a relationship. Kind of older white gentleman. And one day we're at lunch, and I forget how we got on a topic where we started talking about race. And I said, hey, there's a lot of people who carry biases and they don't even realize it, right? As we were talking about before. But I shared with him, when my son goes out, right? And I've had to have conversations with him about how to carry himself, remind him in certain situations, no matter what, the first thing people are going to see is that he is a Black man, right? And the cautions that he must now understand and take into account, right? The concern that we have sometimes, when he goes out in different types of settings and things like that, that is real, right? And again, going back to the topic about privilege, right? If you don't have that concern for your child when they go out, and that they might be the next story that we keep hearing about in this just silly, just awful just cycle, this horrendous cycle that we just keep seeing played out over and over again, story and story after story. If you don't feel like that is a real concern for your child, then you don't understand your privilege, right? And so that's what I find hard sometimes, having these conversations with folks who are not in this community, because you don't feel it the way that we feel it, right? And so I think that's hard sometimes to really portray that across, right? How when things like with Trayvon, and things like that, when they happen, George Floyd, when these things hit, they hit me differently. They hit hard. And I think, the one thing, people saw firsthand, right? They saw a man die on the ground with an officer's knee to his neck, right? Asking for his mother, right? And I think that helped people understand in a way what we feel, because it's very real, right? That we see that could happen to our kids, right? And I think that's what I find really difficult having these conversations sometimes. That, and again, going back to the commercialization of it, and it can be disheartening sometimes when you're in, corporate America, and you still see, here we are in 2023 now, you still see some of the same things being played out, the same inequities being played out. That's hard, right? That's hard sometimes to see that, and to not get what's the word I'm looking for? Not get, just disgusted by the whole situation and kind of throw your hands in the air, So that's what I find difficult about the conversation. One thing I will say, though, is I'm finding more and more people like you, Diolinda, right? Who want to understand, right, what that feels like, who want to, they see it, recognize it ain't right, right? They're going to go educate themselves. They're going to listen. They're going to ask questions on how can I help, right? Because I see it. I don't like it, right? That's what's making these conversations easier today than it was 10, 15, 20 years ago, right? Is now we're seeing people who are more genuinely interested in helping. But I think what makes it most difficult is, while I said, like I said, I'll come back to this, I am a proud Black man, and I love this beautiful melanin, but it comes with challenges, right? And the challenge for me in having these conversations is for folks to really understand what that challenge looks like, because they've never had to live it.
That is really powerful, Jason. And I hear you on that. That's I've heard from many other Black voices that echoing that as the same, really the inability for people to put themselves truly in the shoes of someone in the Black community. There are many people, I know white folks, almost all of them are just shocked that anybody would ever think to have such a conversation like you're talking about. They think, oh, well, as long as you're, being nice and this, that, at a litany of reasons, right? Then you should be fine. It's an incredible lack of awareness. And as you said, privilege to not ever have to think about that. So really appreciate you sharing that insight. And Diolinda, on to you for the same question. What do you think has been the hardest for you that you've struggled with personally about discussing issues about race in America?
For me, it's saying the wrong thing. As a woman and a mother of a daughter, I feel like, and this is, I'm going to make the big mistake that white people often make, and I'm going to turn it around and it's about me, but I'm going to say this and then qualify it. As a woman and a mother of a daughter, I get a little bit of a taste, because when my daughter goes out, I tell her, watch where you park, don't have too much to drink, buddy system, this and that. But it's so far expanded when you're talking about the Black experience, because you have to worry about your daughters, you have to worry about your sons, you have to worry about your wife in childbirth, you have to worry about going to the grocery store in the middle of the day. And and I have heard, in terms of facing law enforcement, oh, just do as you're told and everything will turn out right. Well, we know that's not true. We know that doesn't work. So then what? So it's, in having conversations, I know I've made mistakes in the past with my thoughts and occasionally my words, and I can't claim that I'm not going to make mistakes in the future. So that's the hardest part for me.
That is so real, because it's fear that keeps us from doing a lot of things that we should do, just in general, right? It's fear, right? And the fear of saying the wrong thing, showing up in the wrong way is very real. All of us, even me, we all suffer from that. And I think that's where having these safe circles where you are free to express yourself, right? I think is so valuable, which is why we need to be having more conversations like this in safe environments where, you can say what you were thinking, and it might come out the wrong way or it might come out the right way, right? And let's say it still is offensive, but at least now you might know that what you were thinking or what you said, why that could be viewed a certain way, right? It's when you don't communicate that, when you don't share how you're thinking, right, or how you're feeling, for fear of blowback or things like that, that we don't grow, that we don't learn, that we don't build allies, that we don't become anti-racist, And so I think it's really important to, step into that fear, Diolinda, right? Find you those safe communities, BFG, right? Me, our next coffee conversation that you and I are gonna have, okay? Um, it's important for us to have those safe environments where we can just say what's on your mind, right? And I'm gonna do the same. And I'm gonna say some stuff I'm sure that's gonna ruffle feathers or might not be the right thing to say or the wrong thing is said. Heck, I might have already done it on this thing. But the thing is, I know I'm in a safe community and I really don't care what other people think. It's about the people who I care about and what you think, right? And making sure you understand where I'm coming from. And so I can see where you're coming from and we can help each other, right? And as long as we have those safe communities, it's okay, right? So I appreciate you though, being honest again about that fear and what you don't, what you find uncomfortable about these conversations. That's very valuable to kind of step into that and own it.
Jason, I just want to thank you again, really, for being so real in this conversation and really allowing, for this vulnerability in the conversation. Because I think in general, the way the world is right now, right, with cancel culture and everyone's so harsh on each other and everybody's, really scared no matter what, I suppose. I mean, can't speak on behalf of everybody, but a lot of folks, no matter what their background is or ethnicity or position are afraid these days to speak out because, or even ask questions, as you said, the learning process, right? And I feel that's, that can be really sad. Like, as you're saying, that what you're saying really resonates with me because we learn from these opportunities. I love how you're talking about that. And if we're not going to communicate, if we're not even going to speak about it, it's almost, I wonder if in some ways that almost harbors more bad feelings in a way, because you're not clearly communicating your questions or your thoughts. And, I think when people are stifled like that and communication is not real and it's not valuable, then all of us really miss out on any chance to learn from each other. And so I just want to say thank you so much for really leaning into the vulnerability on this call, because it's something I feel is lacking in society in general. There's a lot of, people don't have a whole lot of room for vulnerability on a big scale. People can be pretty harsh.
Quick to, just chastise you if you say the wrong thing. And I am the king of kind of head mouth misalignment. So it's I've fallen victim many a times, but we can't let that hold us back from having the conversations that need to be had so that we can advance an agenda that needs to be pushed forward, frankly, and not take steps backwards in this country. Because unfortunately, it seems in some ways we're starting to do that.
Yeah. Well, I know that we are just about at time. Do either of you, I want to be respectful of your time. Do you have a hard stop at this moment at 4 p.m.?
I don't. That hour really flew by.
It did go by quick.
Okay. Jason, do you have a little bit more time to stay on for maybe one more question?
I do.
Okay, I know we had a few, but I didn't want to, cut everybody off and say like, oh, we're at time and everything, because these are really meaningful discussions, but I also want to be respectful of everything else you've got both going on in your life. So we don't have to, stay on if you've got to jump. But I think one thing I heard you mention, Jason, that I think would be great for us to get to, one question that we all kind of agreed that was, very valuable to this discussion, is really talking about, Black-owned businesses and how allyship, what allyship can do to really elevate. We always hear about elevating Black voices, and helping to do that. But what does that really mean? And looking into that. So if you had to name only one action what do you believe other local business owners could take to support Black-owned businesses in San Diego and beyond? Like, what would really move the needle? And, in that same kind of, discussion, can you also share some of your favorite Black-owned businesses and brands?
Gotcha. I think there's, to me, what immediately comes to mind in terms of supporting is use them. I mean, use their products and their services. Buy. You want to support Black businesses, find their products, find their services, use them yourselves, and then promote them, right? They kind of go hand in hand. So it's different to say, hey, go use that product over there. I heard it's really good versus go use this. It was wonderful, right? It met our expectations or exceeded our expectations. Go try them out, right? To me, that is the single biggest thing you could do as a business to support, Black-owned businesses in San Diego and the surrounding county. That's one of the biggest things that you can do, is use their products and their services yourself, and then advocate for their continued use within your business, within your corporation, your company, and promoting them and their services yourself, right? If I had to say one single action, I think that's it, Sarah. That's what immediately comes to mind. And in terms of some of my favorite Black brands, and especially if we're talking about promoting and amplifying Black voices, there's one. If you never ever heard of Rise Urban Nation down in San Diego, so I've been on one of their podcasts, but it's all centered around, here are some cases Black entrepreneurs, sometimes it might be Black artists, but here are today's contributors in many beautiful ways in the Black community, right? Go find Rise Urban Nation, check out some of their podcasts. It's really, really, really outstanding and very well done. Terrell Simmons is the host, but now they're also doing DEI consulting, right? And he is a DEI expert. So he and his team, that is one that immediately comes to mind. I think that offers a breadth of services that can help businesses. Take it a little bit further north, a couple that come to mind is there is a chef, and actually my wife is helping and working with her. It's a company called Rue's Kitchen. If you go to ruekitchen.com, right? And these amazing vegan sauces, like Cajun jerk sauces that are vegan, okay? Absolutely wonderful. And you can order that online. So going back to what I said, if you want to, the best way to support, buy those sauces, buy and promote the goods and services. And one last one I'll give you is there is a brother in North County, again, who's doing some really cool stuff around healthcare. It's a startup. It's called Exhort Healthcare. And get this, his whole model, he's an his name is Clarence. His background was an ER doctor, right? Notice that, hey man, I think you touched on this a little bit too, Diolinda. Don't think I didn't pick up on what you were putting down earlier about the disparity that exists in some of these health outcomes when you look at it on a community basis. Thank you for pointing that out earlier. But just in general, right, how medicine has gotten away from being patient focused. And so he's looking to disrupt that, right? Where, get this, we're going to focus on patient outcomes as part of medicine and not as the bottom line dollar. And that bottom line dollar is going to follow. So look up Exhort Health. That is a Black owned business in San Marcos. So, and there are many others, yourinsurancplace.com, if you're looking for any insurance, but those are the ones that really, really kind of come to mind at first. And again, if you want the single action to take is to buy and then promote their goods and services.
Excellent. Thank you, Jason. Incredibly helpful and succinct. And again, something that everyone can do. Doesn't have to be overly complicated, doesn't, yeah, I love it.
Nope. I think we all, last I checked, we all cook. I'm just saying.
Mhm.
And whether you're vegan or not, it doesn't matter. The sauces are excellent. So
Oh, yeah.
they're great. Exactly.
So, Diolinda, same question for you.
Yes.
What action do you think, from your perspective, that you could take to support Black-owned businesses, in local San Diego and beyond? And do you have any favorite Black-owned businesses and brands that you'd like to share?
I do. So I'm in 100% agreement with Jason. Just vote with your dollar. That's what any business wants, is to be promoted and to be supported financially. That's what keeps the lights on. In terms of Black-owned businesses in San Diego, I have two I can highly recommend off the top of my head. One is Earthwell Refill. They're right up the street from me. And when Katrina and her husband opened that location, I was so excited. Not only because I love the products that she sells, but it's an added benefit in that she's helped me. Earthwell Refill has helped me keep so much plastic out of the landfill. It's incredible, because I can take my jars in and get refills of deodorant, and I can get these little spindles of dental floss instead of all of that plastic packaging. I have this little container that I refill with floss because I don't need all that extra stuff. To laundry soap, shampoo, it's incredible, all the stuff that she offers over there. So, and I when I first learned of that business, I started going in and shopping there, and then I said, hey, there's this organization that I belong to, Business for Good, and I hounded her for months. And what's interesting was that I wanted Katrina to become a Business for Good member so that she could join in and give her perspective and knowledge to the environmental committee. And what she did instead, and this kind of makes sense, I don't know why I didn't think about this, but when she joined BFG, she gravitated toward the homelessness community. And I was like, well, of course, because she does environmental stuff all day. That's what she does for a living. So she has, and I'm happy that she's, moving to that she's moving forward in the homelessness community. I did want her for environment. But so anyway, so I love that business. And there's a restaurant over, I don't get out much, so I can walk to her shop, which is great. And there's a restaurant on Park Boulevard that I love. It's Musita Abyssinian Bistro, and it's delicious food. My mother-in-law lives with us, and so we don't take her there very often, because if it doesn't have alcohol, she doesn't understand. She's 92 years old, and if she can't get a beer or a scotch or a wine with her meal, she's like, why are we here? Oh, and the vegetarian thing. We have to sneak vegetables onto her plate.
Oh my gosh, and she's made it to 92.
92.
Well, I guess that's the secret.
That's the secret.
Says.
No veggies, alcohol.
Yeah.
No, she says water, rust your pipes. I said, okay. So, but my husband and I enjoy that restaurant. And then the third business is not in San Diego, but it's a very dear friend of mine. We met back when we were both working in an office at USD, and writing was her side hustle back then. And now she is a full-time author, and her name is Sharon Cooper. And if you like romance novels, she's great. And she's always been, when we first met, she's just always been this really upbeat person who just laughs a lot, and she loves a good romance novel. And so she's a great author. A lot of her books got me through the pandemic, because it's like I I don't want to turn on the news. Can I just read something fluffy and happy? And so SharonCooper.net for anyone who's interested in romance novels.
Check
That's
it
her
out.
full-time
Sure.
gig now. And I can't keep up with her.
That's amazing.
Awesome.
Excellent. Thank you, Diolinda.
Good suggestions, Diolinda.
You too, Jason.
I love it. Well, Jason, if you have a moment, the last question that we, I think all had decided on here was if you wanted to kind of wrap up the convo by sharing a bit about your journey as a Black business owner, an entrepreneur, and, you know, if you'd like to speak a little bit to, you know, really anything you feel comfortable with sharing, but, you know, what you're most proud of, what you feel are your biggest accomplishments, and, you know, maybe your biggest challenges too along the way, or stumbling blocks that you've, you know, encountered and overcome, and yeah, anything you'd like to speak to in that space, go right ahead. We
Well,
love to hear it.
for sure. I think, well, out the gates, we started the company 3 years ago. So the biggest stumbling block was starting the company just a couple months before COVID hit and just wrecked everything, you know. So I think by far that's the biggest stumbling block. But I think as I think about our journey, and again, so we're three founders, myself, Ty, you met, and Ari. You know, as I think back on, you know, our journey, I think one of the things that I think I'm most proud of would be just the progress that we've made, right? From just being a bare bones startup with nothing, just the idea, the concept, to now having a very, you know, working product that we're selling, you know, customers are buying and asking about, right? And not, you know, we got two sides of our market, right? So we've got frontline employees and frontline job seekers who are these companies? We want to know, right? To businesses who are like, hey, we need to attract talent, and we need to keep more of our workers, right? Can you help us, right? To go from a concept to actually having products and services that are meeting those needs on both sides of the market, I think I'm just extremely proud of. And I think as part of the journey, what I've also found to be really rewarding when I kind of reflecting back on our conversation is the communities and people that have come to render aid. Remember, we talked about that, right? That have come to render aid. And I'll just tell you a couple of quick stories. So you all know Alexis, right? And I met Alexis Villanueva. I met her through Village Up, right? And that was a community that really came to us, and it's a community that's all about helping, you know, BIPOC women startup founders, right? Because there isn't necessarily a community that's geared towards, you know, helping founders coming from that particular demographic. If you look, I forget the stat, but just the amount of VC dollars that go to not the, you know, to non-BIPOC is massive, right? So the disparity is huge, and I'm just using that just one factor. But I think for me, when I look back on our journey, is having communities like Village Up, is having communities like Business for Good, right? And we didn't do it to necessarily promote the business. We did it because it's the right thing to do, and I love the people. I love people like you, Sarah, that I've got a chance to meet. You, Diolinda, and Danae, and Mikey, and we talked about Sam earlier. Just cool people who want to do what's right. That's why I left corporate America, was to do what's right. So it's what's been a rewarding part of that journey, right? As a Black man, as a Black founder, has been finding communities that are extremely supportive of me and what we are doing, right? And I think that's the other thing that has been really rewarding on this journey, is having a message that resonates, that crosses racial lines, right? Another real quick story, there's a gentleman, his name is Gary Garrettson. Hope you don't get mad at me for calling him out on here. But if you look at us, you would, man, it couldn't be any more different. You know, I'm kind of maybe a little bit on the shorter side, you know, keto, just a little bit, you know, tall guy, right? He's older, right? Retired, you know, Vietnam veteran, I'm not as young, but younger. White, Black. I mean, just looking at us, we look completely different when we're getting together for coffee, at Starbucks or something like that. Because I consider him a really good friend now. And he's someone who I met him at a chamber event once, heard our message about what we're doing, and he approached me and he said, "Hey, you know what? I really like what you're doing. I used to be in talent acquisition for years at Aramark, right? I used to do all that kind of stuff." So I think what's been rewarding for me is to see people like Gary now go out of their way to help this Black co-founder in his business because the message resonates with him, right? And he's not the only one, right? I think about Rachel Bell at the Vista Chamber of Commerce, another person, the message has resonated, right? So I think when I think about on this journey, it's also not just the community, but the individuals that have come to help. And I think the challenge is, number one, is that still lie ahead. Minority-owned businesses are still the survival rates are less, right? Especially coming from startup space, there are much fewer of us, right? So I think those challenges still exist. But if you ask me, Ty, or even RA or latest edition, Wes, to the team, I think we're all still very, very optimistic about the future, right? When we have the relationships that we've been able to build, because one of the biggest things I've learned in this journey is don't go it alone. You can't go it alone. It's about community, and that's kind of where I'm coming back to this theme. Where I would end there would be when I think about the Black community, and I think about allyship, and I think about going to other conversations about anti-racist. It's about expanding this community of help, right? Of helping and serving each other. And if we're going to do that, if you want to help and serve and be a part of this Black community, let's leave the commercialization. Let's have the conversations that people are scared to have. Diolinda, find those safe circles and seek to understand versus be understood. And let's talk, right? And then let's follow that talk up with action, because that's what a real ally and an anti-racist would do.
Jason, thank you so much for your insight and your thoughts throughout this conversation, for taking time out of your day and your busy schedule to really enlighten us and just provide such a valuable experience, I think, for this discussion. This has been, personally for me, one of the most valuable interactions on the topic of allyship and race and all of those areas that are so uncomfortable for many of us to jump into, and your willingness to really participate in this, to lend all of your insight and education in this area is so appreciated. I think that business for good, I know I'm saying bleh, so I'm already committing all of these things, but I'm like, I'm the moderator.
Good.
What's my role here? Trying to
good,
be like a
it's all
commentator at the same time. I don't know what I'm doing here, I'm just facilitating the questions. But what you've said has really resonated with me. Diolinda, I so appreciate your honesty and candor coming to the table today. Thank you so much for lending your insight. I hope that this was also valuable and meaningful for the both of you, and it was not a waste of time.
Oh no, not at all.
Together.
And Jason, I want to thank you. When I came into this conversation and said that I was a little nervous, I knew from the get-go that you would create a safe space for me, for us. And I appreciate that.
Well, you are quite welcome, my friend. And I applaud your courage for having the conversation. It's not easy to do, but you did it, and you will serve as a role model for others to kind of follow your lead. At least that's what I hope. I think that's what we all hope happens.
Yeah, You are both role models for anything in this space of pushing this conversation further into that space of of getting real. Like you said, Jason, let's just be real. Let's just have an open conversation about this. You've just both done such a phenomenal job today with that. I hope everyone who's watching, who's had a chance to join us for this conversation, has also found it valuable and meaningful. And also look for the article. We'll be writing an article, featuring this video and some key takeaways from all of the great discussion today, and also some points for reflection moving forward in terms of allies. And really anything that we've discussed here today that can be a little bit uncomfortable, ways and tips to really kind of reflect on that and dig deeper into our own, minds and hearts around anti-racism and allyship. So.
And you've done a fantastic job facilitating today too, Sarah.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you,
I honestly
Sarah.
have never moderated anything, so I feel like I'm a weird talk show host being like,
No,
yeah,
you did
this
good.
looks
You did
and
good.
that was
This was
good.
awesome.
So
Yeah,
hopefully it didn't come off all corny and
you're
always
natural.
weird. But yes, thank you both. And yes, hope you have a fantastic day. And for anyone else watching, visit us at businessforgoodsd.com, learn what we're about, come to one of our general member meetings. We have the schedule listed on the website. If you're curious, we welcome you to just come and sit in on a meeting and see what we're all about. We'd love to have you help us move the needle and shape more sustainable, equitable and inclusive policies for everybody here in the San Diego region. So thank you all, and good day to you, Jason and Diolinda.
You too, guys. Thank you,
Bye,
Sarah.
thank you.
I'll see you,
Thank you.
Diolinda. I'm gonna call you about coffee. All right.
Definitely. You're on.
All right. Take care, guys.
Bye,
Peace.
guys.
Bye.